part two of the conversation with Regina Townsend from The Broken Brown Egg.
Whoever thought making a baby could be so hard? Luckily, the fertility journey isn't meant to be traveled alone. Eloise Drain has helped hundreds of people build and grow their families over the last 15 years, and she's ready to share her insider knowledge and expertise with you. So grab a seat and let's talk fertility and alternative family building in the Fertility Cafe.
Welcome back to Fertility Cafe. So excited that you decided to join us for part two with Regina Townsend from The Broken Brown Egg. And that is the problem. Well, that's the problem. Everybody is afraid to have the conversation. You know, people are afraid to have the conversation about racism and what's going on in this country right now and what is happening to this country right now. And the fact that, you know, we're finally starting to have these conversations because of the murders that have been going on and they continue to keep going on. And you know, and it's funny how here we are, we're talking about fertility, but this fertility, us being able to have children, we're talking about our future children that potentially could be going through and being a George Floyd or, you know, so it, for us, it's not like, oh, it just ends it. Okay, we had issues with our fertility. We had to go through IVF. Okay, well, we finally went through IVF. Now we're finally pregnant. Well, guess what? Now we have to worry about, because we are finally pregnant and we go to the obstetrician. Well, the obstetrician isn't really paying attention or listening to what we're saying and the issues that we're having. And so now we have to worry about, well, am I going to die because of the issues that I am having during this pregnancy? I mean, heck, just look at Serena Williams.
Yep.
And the issues that she had surrounding her own pregnancy. And she's a very well-known, you know, superstar, right? And her having her own problems. And it's just like, okay, so if she's going to have problems and having to advocate for herself and about the difficulties that she experienced, well, what about little piddly old me that don't nobody know about?
Mm-hmm.
And nobody really cares about.
Who doesn't have that level of health care. Who doesn't have that tax level of health care.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Or about these women that are, who really don't have a voice. I mean, just in the state of Georgia alone, we have one of the highest mortality rates in the country for Black women when it comes to pregnancy. And out of what, I think we have 159 counties in the state. And out of that, I want to say 9 of those counties don't even have a pediatrician. I want to say it's 79 of those counties that don't even have an OBGYN. So where are these women going to get care? And who is doing anything about it? Yes.
To me.
Yes. It really is. And it's just like, okay, it doesn't just end for us at, okay, we couldn't have a child, so let's go through infertility, let's go through and seek out a fertility treatment. And it's like, okay, well, we can do that, but then we also have to worry about delivery. And then after delivery, then we have to worry about our children, you know, everybody worries about their children. But the worries that we have on top of just the normal worry that any other parent would, we also have to worry about, well, you're going to see my child, and the first thing you're going to see is the color of that child's skin. And you're already going to make presumptions about the color of that child's skin without my child ever speaking or opening their mouth to say anything. You've already made up in your mind what you're thinking. So, and then you wonder why there's so much anger and frustration and, you know, and then let's even bring it back to IVF real quick, or even fertility care. How are we even going to be able to afford it?
Listen, first and foremost. First and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost. And that's one of the difficult things, too, because, again, you try not to lump us all into one thing. And I know that some of us got it. Some of us don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also a difficult conversation that I've had, because I've had people who have said, you know, that there are fertility coaches out, and they're saying, you know, well, Regina, with what you do with the Broken Brown Egg, you could charge people to, coach them through this. And I have had a very difficult time with that because I'm constantly thinking, yeah, but my primary audience is Black women who are already trying to figure out how to pay for the treatment. Now I'm going to charge her to talk to me? Girl, I'm just going to show you what to do because I did.
Yes.
And we're going to walk through it together. I can't think about that because I understand in just my own experience how stressful it was to, number one, be dealing with infertility and the physical issues of PCOS without insurance. And to be afraid that if I don't get a job with better insurance in this amount of time, I don't know that I'll ever be able to address this other thing that's hanging over my head. And now that stress is on top of the additional stress. And I'm worried about, my physical well-being, my marriage, my mental health, all of these things. And I'm also stressed about, let me find a job that's got good insurance so that I can have a doctor so I don't have to keep going to the county. I'm probably going to release it pretty soon, but I was going through my computer the other day and I found a video that I had done a few years ago. It had to be 8-9 years ago, where I had taken a girlfriend to the doctor because I realized that it's important because we have such a mistrust of the medical community. It is very helpful for us to have a buddy that we can either have to talk to us on the phone while we're going to the doctor or who will sit in the waiting rooms with us. And when I was first dealing with all of this and I didn't have insurance, there have been times where I'd sat in the county hospital or one of the other clinics for hours. I mean, I would bring a book, I would bring a lunch, because even though I would tell them in triage, yeah, I've been bleeding for 30 days, they would still just give me a number and have me go sit down. And so I was very used to feeling like I'm just going to give up and walk out. And so when I had a girlfriend who needed to go, we went together so that she could have the courage to sit through it the whole time. And so when I watched this video, I remember I saw myself talking about this experience, and we had gone to one of the county hospitals here in Chicago. And not only were we sat in a waiting room where there was no one at the desk, there was no one to tell us we were being waited on, there was nobody explaining any of the procedures. There was a woman who told us she was 41 years old and that they were testing her for fibroids. She was terrified on the phone telling a friend. She didn't know what fibroids were, but they had just sent her into this room where they said they were going to do x-rays. Nobody had talked it through with her. Nobody had explained what it was. Nobody even walked her over to the x-ray room. They just sent her. And in this video, I could remember, it was like it was yesterday. The waiting room had broken pamphlet holders. The information was crumpled or not, or the pamphlet holders were empty. There was no one in the reception area. When we found people so that we could ask them, hey, who's supposed to be over here? They were sitting there just chuckling it up. A couple of people who were working there were just talking to each other, hanging out at work. Every desk that we went to, somebody was just getting off work, and they'd be like, somebody be with you. And I remember my friend saying, thank you for coming, because if you hadn't come with me, I would have left. And when I think about our Black people who don't have insurance, and when you're dealing with something like fertility issues, that experience could very well be the end of the road for you, because you may just be like, you know what, forget it. Nobody can help me. I quit. And when we're talking about the fact that, you know, like in Illinois, IVF is covered, but I have to have the insurance first. I have to have the job first. And so there's so many of us who are struggling with, even before we can get to the fact that I want to get to IVF, I first just wanted my body to work right. I first just wanted to not be bleeding for 40 days. And the fact that these hospitals were like, well, here, just sit in the waiting room, and would leave me there. There was one time I remember I sat in a room and they forgot I was there. I had to go back out to the desk to remind them I was there. I had a doctor who performed a colposcopy didn't explain what it was. I've had a doctor go in the hallway and loudly express that she was upset that no one had followed up with me because I could have had cervical cancer, loudly in the hall where I could hear her and everybody else could hear her. So I think about all of those indignities that are at the root of before I could even get to dealing with the fertility part. I was stuck with incompetence when I was just trying to get reproductive health care, basic reproductive health care that wasn't just throwing birth control pills at me, constantly throwing birth control pills at me without even explaining, because there are risks to the birth control pill too.
Okay.
And nobody talked those through.
No. As a matter of fact, part of that article, the article I read about how the myth of the Black hyperfertility harms us, one of the things that they had said was reproductive justice is about access to contraceptives and abortions, but it also means the freedom to be a parent. And you know, from when my daughters were young, and granted, it also stems from being at home and being educated at home. But if you're not educated yourself, how are you going to be able to educate the next generation, right? And us talking about our reproduction from young, and talking about your period, and talking about the things that make us up as women, and men, of course, but since I'm a woman, I can speak about being a woman, right? And being able to have those conversations early on so that we can begin educating the next generation who could then educate the following generation. And one of it being, you know, no, it is not okay for you to be bleeding for 30 to 40 days. That is abnormal. And it is not okay for you to go to a doctor's office and you not be treated equally like everybody else. It is not okay for your doctor to be not thinking of your privacy just like they would anybody else's. Like, and it's time that we start calling people out, because the problem is that we don't. It's just like, well, no, I'm just never going to come back here again. Instead of saying, you know what, let me tell you what you need to know for the next person. I may never come back here. However, I am going to inform you of what you need to know so that the next person that's going to come behind me, you're going to treat her or him better than you treated me.
Yep. And I'm going to take it up with who I feel can affect change.
Exactly.
And that comes from empowering. It definitely comes from empowering our young people, because I don't remember any conversation in sexual education class that was more than just don't get pregnant.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember any conversation that said anything about PCOS, that said anything about fibroids. And I can remember there were ads on the radio all the time about fibroid treatment, and nobody knew what it was. I just kept hearing ads on the radio. From the time I was very young, I remember there would be ads with this happy-go-lucky music and a Black woman saying how there's a new treatment where a hysterectomy might not be required. And it was like, didn't know what a hysterectomy was, didn't know what fibroids were. And we weren't talking about it. And I remember when I found out what they were, I was shocked. I was like, oh, that's a big deal that people I knew probably dealt with. Endometriosis, I never heard about. I had in high school people I knew who were afraid that they wouldn't be able to have kids one day, or who had been told that by a doctor, but not explained they weren't taught anything. And so if we can figure out how to empower our young people and stop treating it like we can't talk about sex because it's scary. We can't talk about that because then they're going to do it. We got to scandalize it. No, we need to normalize those conversations, because that's how you empower people to make informed decisions and choices. When you make it so that it's so scary and so hush-hush, that's when it's so intriguing. Oh, I got to try it now because you didn't tell me nothing about it.
Okay.
So I got to look at it.
Okay. And not explain to them the various types of birth control and how all birth control out there is not good birth control. And you know, my cousin used the Depo for years and years and years. And to the point now where unfortunately it has now affected her, and where the calcium in her bones have pretty much like dried out, and she's having all kinds of other issues or whatever. And it's just like, well, that's funny because I used to remember about all of the ads about birth control, you know, the whole you stay away teen pregnancy, and how, you know, to prevent teen pregnancy, you need to be on these birth controls and these long-term birth controls, and, you know, this, that, and the other. And nobody wants to really start talking about all these dang birth controls that are out here that are actually causing more harm than it is helping. And it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, it prevented me from getting pregnant, but then look at all of the other problems that has caused down the line. And funny enough, I'm starting to get more intended parents that are in their late 20s, early 30s that are needing to work with a gestational carrier because they're having, you know, whether it's whatever they have, cancer or endometriosis or PCOS, or I had one lady from 17, she ended up having to have a hysterectomy. And always knew that she needed to have help from a gestational carrier. And it's just like, well, why as a society are we not stopping and looking at, okay, what is really causing all of these problems that all of these people are starting to have infertility issues at such a young age? And, you know, and maybe some of these birth controls that they're saying that is just oh so great, and then, you know, a couple of years later it's like, oh no, you don't want to use that. I mean, even my own sister, back in the days, it was called, oh gosh, of course I'm going to forget the name, Norplant or whatever, the one that you put in the arm. Well, she got it in her arm, then it was causing her a lot of problems, so she took it out. And they told her, okay, you know, it's going to take a while. You'll be fine as far as like birth control or whatever. It's going to be in your system for quite some time. You should be good. Well, she took it out. I think like a month or two later, she got pregnant with my niece. And my niece actually ended up being born where her fingers were deformed and her toes were deformed. But, you know, nobody want to take responsibility that it was that birth control.
The birth control, the residual effects of the birth control.
Exactly. And even with my daughters, I mean, you know, they're older, and it's just like when we started having those conversations about birth control, like it will be non-hormonal and we will be monitoring this. And it wasn't a conversation of her hiding the fact that she was on birth control. It was the conversation of, let me help educate you, so that when you do go to the doctors, you know what you're talking about. And they're not just going to tell you, well, this is what you need to do and this is how it's going to be done. Oh, no. We're going to have a conversation together. You're going to educate me. And then we are going to make an informed decision together.
Yep. And that is not something that people think 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds are ready to talk about. But let me tell you something. As a teen librarian who sometimes on accident and sometimes because they want to tell me everything about their life, these are conversations that they're having with their friends anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So you might as well make it so that talking to you is a safe and accessible thing. And that comes also with us getting comfortable with it ourselves and letting go of some of our own feelings about it so that we can have conversations that are effective and impactful and not frightening, because that fear does not prevent anything. Creating fear does not prevent things. It doesn't do that. It just makes it so that we have more knots to untangle in the long run.
Right.
I've also got a concern about doctors having conversations with these young people without us giving the information, because they tell them things that they haven't had any experience with yet, and so they don't understand the impact of what's being told to them.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I had people when I was in high school who were told by a doctor, you will never have kids, or you're going to have difficulty having kids. And that was the end of the conversation. And I have people to this day. I have a soror who her daughter is in college now, and there was a doctor who told her when she was like 16 or something that she was either not going to have kids or she was going to have difficulty having kids. And I remember when my soror was talking to me about it, she was saying, but when you're telling that to a 15 or 16-year-old who doesn't want kids, they're not thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, oh, okay, thanks for letting me know. They're not thinking, one day I might, one day I will, or one day I won't. But why? Explain to me what is happening to my body while that is the case. And what will I need to do when I get to a point where I may want children? What are you telling me my options will be then? What are you telling me my options are now? And so because we haven't had the conversation, when you're telling that person that, and they have no concept of how that's going to affect them in the future, they leave it at that without asking the necessary question. And then 15 years later, they're pissed at the fertility center trying to understand why nobody told me. Nobody told me this is what this was. Nobody told me what pelvic inflammatory disease was. Nobody told me tubes could be blocked. Nobody told me that, going through a pad an hour is not okay. Nobody told me. And that's the anger that a lot of us have, is that nobody told me conversation, that nobody said, oh, 3 other people in our family have struggled with this, or or did you know this person in our family was adopted? Did you know this? You don't have any other conversation. And so then when you're in it, you're so pissed because you're like, I'm alone, but I don't have to be. I didn't have to be alone. I didn't have to experience this now, because if somebody would have talked to me, I could have addressed this then. And now I feel like I'm fighting the clock.
Right.
I feel like I'm chasing my own tail. I'm fighting this clock that's loud over my head, but at the same time, as a Black person, I need to work harder than everybody else. So, let me make sure that I'm getting my career, and let me make sure that I'm not a statistic. So let me make sure that I got this going, and make sure that I got that going, and make sure that I find this partner, and when you add all of that up, and then you get to the point where you feel like, everybody has lied to me, and I'm tired. You just angry. You just
You're angry, and then you turn around and it's like, well, who can I really turn to actually get accurate information? Like, I don't know what I don't know. So how do I know where to go to get the information that I need to get? How do I know that the information that is being shared out there is really factual and it's true and it pertains to me? I don't know that. So of course you're going to be frustrated. I did a show on the OWN network and about Black women and infertility. And since then, I've been getting a lot of phone calls from other Black women that are dealing with infertility. And it's the same thing over and over again. I had no idea. I don't know which way to turn. I don't know if I can trust the doctors of what they're saying. I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford any of this. One lady was telling me just to get the testing that she needed done was like thousands of dollars for just testing. And she's like, I work like a dog, but my insurance, and I have insurance, but the insurance that I have, they don't cover anything fertility related. Not a test, not a medication, not screening, nothing. Everything has to come out of my pocket. So how do I know that the tests that they're telling me that I need to take, are they really good tests? Are they really going to find the issues? And granted, no, this doesn't just affect Black women, but unfortunately, though, for a lot of Black women, when it comes to finding the money that they need to be able to pay for this, it's not, I can't just call my mother and say, hey, Mom, can you give me $10,000 so I can go run all of these medical tests and see why I'm having all of these issues? It's not really realistic. So in society, I think we need a drastic change in from the time a child is born of color through adulthood, on from how we teach our children, what we say to our children, how we educate our children, and then forward. So that if there is an issue when they are teens and they're getting these abnormal periods, it's not a conversation of like, oh, I'm going to have to talk to my girlfriend because I can't really talk to my mom about this because, I don't want to talk about it. Or thinking that it's normal. And thinking like, oh, it's no big deal. Oh, okay, good. I'm not getting my period right now. Oh, I haven't had my period in 6 months. I know I haven't been sexually active, so I'm not pregnant, but that's okay. I don't have to deal with it. It's like, no, actually, that's not okay. There's a problem with that. We're not educating each other. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Not how the body. No, I was just saying that's not how the body works, and we don't know. You know.
No.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. And I also want to talk about the Black men who also definitely have a distrust in any kind of doctor. Like, I mean, gosh, even my husband, this man will not go to the doctor. I mean, he has to be literally like damn near dragged to the doctor's office. Yeah. And it gets to a point where by the time he gets there, it's so bad off because of that distrust that we've already talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And it also has to start with educating the Black men and our Black boys in the community about, okay, just like your Black sisters, they need to be empowered about their bodies. Well, you as Black men need to have the same. And we need to start having the conversations because sometimes the issue is on the Black men side of fertility, but they're not going to the doctors and seeking out treatment. Like, what? No, they don't do that. You had mentioned, you had mentioned about your husband having issues with diabetes. How open was he to go and seek out treatment, along with you?
Well, I think when he first realized he had diabetes, it was because he was losing weight. And ironically, this past week, my niece's father was in the hospital. Same exact thing. He was just feeling sick. And it was probably something that had been there. You know, you've been feeling a little down, but you're so used to, I don't go to the doctor, either it costs or they don't listen, or you go out for one thing, you come out with two, whatever the case, and just hadn't gone. And then was so sick that he finally ended up in the hospital last week. And now we just found out he has diabetes. And I think the same thing was happening with my husband. He was losing weight. He thought it had been because he was walking. It also will affect your bladder control. It'll affect all these other things. And it's not until it gets that bad that then they're like, well, let me go see what this is. And he's been fighting for years now with this diabetes. And even now, he still has to kind of push himself to make sure to take the medication, make sure to go follow up, make sure to call, make sure to check in and get his levels checked and those kind of things. Because the other thing about being a Black man, at least that I can observe as obviously not being a Black man, is that they're given so many messages about what it means to be a productive man. They're given so much messaging about what it means to be a man in general, but then they're fighting against stereotypes also. They're fighting against, I do have a job. I do go to work. I do go to school. I do take care of my family. I do all these things. And so now they're overworking themselves to the point where they don't take time to go to the doctor. I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to deal with that. I don't have time to, because if I don't go to work, then y'all gonna say I'm a lazy Black man. If I don't go to school, then y'all gonna say I'm an ignorant Black man. If I don't take care of my family first, then y'all gonna say I'm a nothing Black man. So I gotta do all those things. And so at the end of the day, when I'm exhausted, I'm not thinking about going to the doctor. I'm not thinking about eating right. I'm thinking, you know what? I got to work these 2 shifts, and I got to make sure I got this going, make sure I'm doing that. Let me grab some McDonald's. Let me grab some Wendy's. And then when it's bad and they do slow down, we have more knots to untie than we would have had in the first place. And I